This is Special Chronicles, giving respect and a voice to people with special needs.
I shudder thinking how the world can be so cruel. I lend my voice to those who can't. It's time we try, it's time we care, it's time we stand. It starts with a voice.
Welcome to the Special Chronicles Podcast. My name is Daniel Smrokowski. I'm the founder and host of Special Chronicles and a Southern Travel Global Must-Know alum with Special Olympics. Our website, specialchronicles.com. You can see my archives of over 750 episodes absolutely for free. And follow Special Chronicles on social media, Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Again, specialchronicles.com. This week on a rebroadcasted episode of the Special Chronicles Podcast, RespectAbility Senior Vice President of Entertainment and News Media, Lowen Appelbaum, sits down with me, award-winning podcast host Daniel Smrokowski, for a conversation about how this nonprofit organization, RespectAbility, is fighting stigmas and advancing opportunities for people with disabilities, inclusion in Hollywood, and how the RespectAbility Report focuses on bipartisan political commentary on U.S. elections with a focus on disability issues. And now, with this being an election year and just overall, I thought more people should know about the work of RespectAbility. And so that's why we are rebroadcasting this in this summer season here. So with that, the following episode has been previously broadcasted.
This is Special Chronicles, giving respect and a voice to people with special needs.
Special Chronicles is proud to partner with the ComEd Energy First Ambassador Program. The Energy First is the country's first energy efficiency education program designed for and taught by people with disabilities. You can learn more at specialchronicles.com/ComEd. That's specialchronicles.com/ComEd, and we thank ComEd for the generous support of Special Chronicles. This episode 274 is also brought to you by listeners like you. You can join our supporters with a tax-deductible donation today to help us continue our mission of giving respect and voice to people with special needs. You can go to specialchronicles.com/giving. That's specialchronicles.com/giving. And we thank you for your generous support of our mission at Special Chronicles. This week on Special Chronicles, we are joined by Lowen from RespectAbility, talking about their work in advancing opportunities for people with disabilities, inclusion in Hollywood, and much more. It's coming up right now on specialchronicles.com.
I shudder thinking how the world can be so cruel. My voice to those who can't. It's time we try, it's time we care, it's time we stand. It starts with a voice.
You're listening to the Special Chronicles show. This is the show where podcasting disability really from an insider's perspective, and we are given a voice to people with special needs. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome back to the Special Chronicles show. My name is Daniel, the host and founder of Special Chronicles, and so good to be back behind the mic. And joining us, we've got an exciting show for you today, because today's guest is Lowen Appelbaum.
Correct, Lauren Appelbaum.
Lowen is the Communications Director of RespectAbility, a nonprofit organization fighting stigmas and advancing opportunities for people with disabilities. And she is the managing editor of the RespectAbility Report, a publication at the intersection of disability and politics. Previously, she was a digital researcher with the NBC News political unit. Currently, Lowen oversees RespectAbility's outreach to Hollywood to stand up against ableism and other prejudice while promoting positive, accurate, diverse, and inclusive media portrayals on TV and in film. Welcome to Special Chronicles, Lowen.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on your show. I've enjoyed watching some of my friends be on your show before, and I'm glad to be able to lend a voice here today.
Awesome. And so I first found out about RespectAbility a couple years ago when my friend and actually one of our board members, Darlene, who lives in the Maryland, DC area, had told me about your whole organization. And so, but for any new listeners who may not be familiar about you and RespectAbility, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Sure. So I know you asked me to talk a little bit about RespectAbility and a little bit about myself. RespectAbility was started with the goal of increasing employment opportunities for people with disabilities nationwide. Our mission statement is to fight stigmas and advance opportunities for and with people with disabilities. So we do this through a wide variety of work, none of which includes lobbying, by the way. We started and we wanted to take a look and see what best practices exist out there that work best for employing people with disabilities. We've met with 44 of our nation's governors to educate them on ways that they can ensure that their state policies lead to the most employment opportunities for individuals with disabilities living there. We enjoy doing various case studies, including our community of practice currently going on in Long Beach, California. And there we are working with a community that has a very low percentage of employment for people with disabilities, and working with the disability community, the education community, employers to try to figure out ways that we can increase that together, where we just facilitate, but they, as the community, are able to work on increasing these opportunities. We also have a very robust fellowship program with the goal of increasing diverse voices for the next generation of leadership within the disability community. We offer fellows in our communications department, in our public policy department, our development and fundraising department, and our faith inclusion department. And these are for students and recent graduates with and without disabilities, working side by side together. A few other areas of our work include our nonpartisan political candidate questionnaire and outreach, as well as our work with foundations and philanthropists to ensure that they are including the disability lens, as well as our work in Hollywood outreach. We feel very strongly that, what we see impacts how we feel. And so because a lot of what dictates people's thoughts in employing people with disabilities come from this issue of stigma, we are spending a lot of time and effort out in Hollywood trying to increase positive, accurate portrayal there. You asked a little bit about me personally. You mentioned that I was a political journalist in my former life, and then spent some time as a communications manager. I have a 2.5-year-old daughter who means the world to me, and so she and my husband and I and our dog live here in Maryland, outside Washington, D.C. And outside of work, I very much enjoy chairing the Disability Inclusion Committee at my synagogue, as well as work on the synagogue musical. So it's a fun way to work in disability inclusion, both for my job and outside in personal life as well.
Awesome. So why did you decide to look at RespectAbility and fighting stigmas and advance opportunities for people with disabilities? What made you decide to come into this work from being a journalist to now working in the disability field?
What I love about my job is that I'm able to use all the skills and contacts that I learned as a journalist for a cause that means something personally to me, and also where I can personally help affect change. There are not many positions where you can kind of come in with different skill sets from a previous career, where then you feel you're making a change. I absolutely love working with young college students who want to be journalists or go into communications, and maybe the system failed them. Maybe they were in a school where they were passed along, but never really learned how to write properly. And to be able to sit and teach and know that this young individual is going to be able to, then potentially pursue a career in journalism or communications nonprofit. And I've had just a little bit of influence in being able to ensure that they've learned how to write a blog post or learned how to go out and do an interview and be able to write something for a newspaper. There aren't many jobs where you get to go home at night after working crazy amount of hours, where you still feel good. You can be totally, utterly exhausted, but you know that you're making a difference. And being able to mentor young students is one of my favorite parts of the job. But then also starting to receive calls from studios where they want our input and our assistance. And being able to ensure that they're not making a mistake, I'm able to see that we're making a difference, and it's a very good feeling to have.
Awesome. So you mentioned in the introduction a little bit about the mission of Respectability. Yes. Can you tell us a little bit more about the mission and some of the initiatives that you guys all currently working on?
Sure. So I guess I kind of already went over some of that a bit. It's kind of, from our employment outreach, I mentioned that, we look for best practices, create case studies. Part of that, we offer webinars where after identifying the best practices that exist elsewhere, to be able to ask those leaders to be able to come and talk about what those programs are, which we offer completely for free to workforce boards, the disability community, politicians, anyone who feels that they can learn from these outside leaders, because we very much feel that we can help people not recreate the wheel. There are great programs that currently exist out there that are succeeding. And if we can help draw attention to those programs, then other people can adopt them, leading to a higher success rate. So that's kind of our core, and a lot of the work that we deal with stigma, especially our Hollywood outreach and our political outreach, kind of comes back to that same idea that we want to make sure that we are creating an environment that can help increase employment opportunities for people with disabilities. And a lot of that starts with changing hearts and minds. Awesome.
So the Respectability report that I mentioned in your introduction, that you're the managing editor, and I believe this started just a couple years ago.
Correct.
Can you tell us a little bit about what this blog is about, or this publication?
Yes. So this started leading up to the 2016 elections, and mainly because while there are a few really great journalists who either have a disability themselves or cover disability issues, it's not widespread. Most newspapers do not have someone on this beat. And we saw a very important area where we could kind of take a look at disability as a civil rights issue and journalism. And so using my journalism background, I created the RespectAbility Report, which is the intersection, a nonpartisan blog of the intersection of politics and disability. And we've been able to do a wide variety of outreach during the 2016 cycle in terms of political outreach. One of our favorite projects was I did a very short training of our fellows, and they went off to Iowa and New Hampshire for more than a month. And we wanted these issues covered in the press. In order for the political press to cover these issues, candidates had to be talking about it. In order for candidates to talk about it, they had to be asked about it. So our fellows with and without visible and invisible disabilities they got there super early to events. They sat in the front row, and as soon as the question and answer period started, they were raising their hand while their partner was there with them, who would record it on an iPhone or a camera, and then we would post that to our YouTube channel with captions, and then our fellows would write about what the candidate said. And we got awesome responses from both sides of the aisle, of people really starting to think about why, if they care about employment in general, that you need to include that disability lens. And we then expanded upon our efforts by creating a questionnaire. We created we were the only ones to have a questionnaire going widespread to gubernatorial and Senate candidates. This followed our questionnaire to all the presidential candidates. And that's something that we are continuing for the 2018 cycle with the questionnaire. And what we do is we send it to all candidates running for governor and Senate. At some point, we'd love to do House as well. It's just a matter of resources. Yeah. And everyone on both sides of the aisle are asked the same exact questions. And then when we receive the answers, we post everything verbatim. As I mentioned, it's very important for us to stay nonpartisan. We want to be able to work with people on both sides of the aisle. So, and then hopefully we get candidates from both sides, or if there are third-party candidates running all sides of the aisle, responding. And then what we do is we send out a state voter guide, which links to the responses verbatim from the candidates. And so it gives people within and without of the disability community an opportunity to learn where candidates stand on issues such as employment and housing and education that affect individuals with disabilities as well as the entire general population.
Awesome. I want to remind all listeners and viewers that our guest today is Lauren who's the communications director at RespectAbility. So, in your introduction, had mentioned that one of the initiatives at RespectAbility that you work a lot on is with inclusion in Hollywood, in films and in TV, and fighting stigmas and encouraging inclusion and equality for people with disabilities. And understand that this past week you were talking with you gave a talk at Pixar on can you tell us a little bit about that talk and some of the other ways that you all encourage inclusion in Hollywood?
Sure. So ever since RespectAbility was started, it was in our mission statement. It was in our mission outline that Hollywood would be one of our areas of work. And in the past year and a half, we've really ramped up those efforts. I travel out to LA on a frequent basis, where we've started a community of practice there as well, working with showrunners, casting directors, talent agents, writers, actors, everyone within the industry, trying to be figuring out how we can not only work within the disability community, but then also working with organizations that care about increasing representation of women or African Americans or Hispanics and Latinos or any other minority, because as you know, and as I'm sure many of your listeners know, disability cuts across every demographic. Yeah. So we feel that if we can raise up more accurate representation in TV and film, it can kind of just, reflect the American population. And with 20% of Americans having a disability, why not, ensure that your TV and film is properly representing our population? So I've found that often studios, they really just don't know what they don't know, and they're afraid to make mistakes. So they're often very excited to find out that RespectAbility offers our services to review scripts, which I've had the opportunity to do. Can't ask me about which films yet, though. And then, being able to just be able to give language guidelines, or connect them to people who are doing really great work. I want to give a shout out to Russell Boast, who over at the Casting Society of America, this past Sunday, he organized a casting call for actors with disabilities. And it was an opportunity for some actors who may not have been able to go before casting directors with a prepared scene. And even more so, all of those auditions that happened around the entire country are now in a video database. So if someone is looking for, say, an African-American woman with only one arm, they'll be able to search for that in the database of people who are trained actors wanting to work, because we definitely have heard from others saying they don't know where to look. And so what we love to do is, just as when we started with figuring out best practices in employment, is figuring out how we can connect people who might be looking for something but not know where to look. Like, who are the talent agents? Who are the people that can be there to assist in those calls? Specifically about Pixar, they just had an entire day of training on inclusion and diversity. And I was invited to speak specifically about disability inclusion, as well as with a focus on invisible disabilities, because in a visual medium, there are things you see, especially in animation, but there are often a lot of areas where there are things that you don't see, and how do you include representation of that? So I gave them a challenge of thinking about their background characters in their films. We all know that Finding Dory had, as all things go, a pretty great representation of disability for a children's film. Had representation of both physical and invisible disabilities, and portrayed in a way that was quite positive. And so, but what I pointed out is that you don't have to have a film about disability to be inclusive of people with disabilities. And so I suggested that why not have a minimum of 10% of all background characters, whether they be animated people, cars, animals, with a visible disability, as a way. And then I also talked about how their films have a chance to educate not only children as they're growing up and becoming and influence them, but also parents of children with disabilities who might be hesitant on or nervous to disclose that their child may have an invisible disability. And in the example of Finding Dory, talked about how Dory's parents provided the scaffolding for her for when she grew up to then be able to find them. And then the last thing that I talked about was that in order to truly have accurate representation of characters with disabilities in their animated films, they needed to have people with disabilities working behind the scenes as well. And so they had launched all these different employee resource groups. And so we talked about the importance of a disability, an employee resource group for employees with disabilities, and how they could increase their efforts on ensuring that they have that represented in their studio.
Awesome.
And I found everyone there to be extremely receptive, extremely interested in ensuring some positive change for the future.
Neat. So I understand that you gave Pixar 10 tips to connect with people with disabilities. Can you walk us through some of these tips that you shared with that?
Yes, I can. If you want to wait one moment, okay. I don't have it fully up in front of me right now, so I just want to make sure I do not misrepresent anything.
Okay. And I'll take the time to remind our listeners and viewers that our guest today is Lowen from who's the communications director at RespectAbility. And
so these 10 tips, which can be applicable for almost any entertainment industry, studio or elsewhere, as well as organizations outside of entertainment. They included things such as ensuring that all events, offices, and products are accessible to people with disabilities. I can say that walking through their studio, it appeared that everything was fully up to code in terms of physical accessibility. Talked about how people with disabilities have been erased by films and TV, and how they have the opportunity to fully change that. And that as they are portraying characters with disabilities, it's important to do so as portraying them as successful members of the community, not as not through the pity framework, but as individuals who are fully inclusive members of the community. We suggested that they give these characters a success story and showcase their skills and innovation. For example, in terms of all entertainment industry, why not show doctors and teachers of all racial and ethnic backgrounds who use a wheelchair or a prosthetic leg? A store clerk, a hospital aide, a food service team member who has Down syndrome. a hero who is dyslexic or blind or uses a speech to text to type and audio text to read. Today, a lot of times characters and people with disabilities are shown either as X-Men with strange super skills or as losers. And most people with disabilities, that doesn't describe people with disabilities. And so the idea is to show the innovation that exists and that people with disabilities can and do succeed in life. I mentioned before the idea of parents using their films to inspire parents of children with disabilities to take full advantage of the success that early intervention can bring their children. We all know that a child's brain is not fully developed at birth, and that early intervention can go a very long way for many children with disabilities. We talked about the idea of toolkits and teaching guides on disability-related topics that connect to their films. We also talked about creating an employee resource group for employees with disabilities, as well as a plan to both hire and retain employees with disabilities, including some outside resources that are kind of experts in that. And then we wanted to talk about, we did a full audit of their website, and I pointed out to members of their team that deal with their website where they could ensure that their website is more fully inclusive. And then we also talked about the importance of having captions and audio descriptions available for all of their films.
Awesome.
It's kind of a very quick overview.
Awesome. So some of the clone shows that are on TV now, on ABC, there's a show Speechless, who actually was an actor with CP, and then and the show Going This Way and other shows. Have you guys at RespectAbility done any work with the shows like Speechless or other shows that are employing actors with disabilities, either on screen or even behind the scenes as well?
Sure. So we obviously love promoting shows that are showcasing disability in a positive light. And we've been involved with Born This Way since the very beginning, promoting them, organizing. When A&E picked it up, we organized a Hollywood-style premiere on Capitol Hill. Mm-hmm. And so we brought out John Tucker and his mom, executives from A&E, creator Jonathan Murray, members of Congress spoke, and kind of tried to bring together all the national groups that exist in the DC area to kind of come together for a massive social media promotion. And then since then, we have used that network to be able to continue promoting shows through social media, through our widespread email lists and Hollywood e-newsletters, showcasing when things are done well. We, as an organization, have chosen not to attack any show or studio or creator if they do something bad. We find that it's most important to have that conversation, behind the scenes. But what we do like to do is whenever they do something that is good, is really highlight that and try and get that out in the press. And one thing I wanted to point out on one of the new shows this year, The Good Doctor, which we do know that the lead himself does not have autism, but portrays a young doctor with autism and savant syndrome. But one thing that they did when promoting the show at the beginning is they found real doctors with disabilities and had them on their TV, on their news, on their national news. And that, to me, is probably one of the best things that we can see, because the idea of TV representation is to show that people with a variety of disabilities are completely capable to do pretty much anything. Absolutely. And so but then being able to go out and find actual doctors with a variety of disabilities, succeeding as surgeons and top of their field. It really just goes to that step of saying, yes, this is not fantasy land. This is reality. This is real life. And I think that is something extremely powerful. I also want to point out that there are studios like Exceptional Minds, which employ young adults with autism, who then end up doing graphics for a lot of films and TV shows, including The Good Doctor. Yeah. And a variety of films that we see. So I think it's great to not only promote what we see on TV and film, but also what's happening behind the scenes too.
Awesome. Do you feel that there are more shows either in TV or in movies that are encouraging hiring people with disabilities, both behind the scenes and on screen as well, instead of in the past few years?
Yes, I do feel there is a shift, and I feel that shift is due not just for disability inclusion, but just inclusion overall. There's just been a shift in American popular opinion that, you can't just have one group representing everyone. And I think that is affecting, across gender lines for women. I think that's affecting across race lines for African Americans, Hispanic, Latinos, and others. And I think that's also having a positive effect on actors and others, performers with disabilities who want to be more involved. I am hopeful. I consider myself more of a person who sees the glass half full. But especially as I've been doing more and more work in Hollywood and working with studios, I see an openness. It's very rare that you come across someone who doesn't want to include people with disabilities because they just don't want to. It's more of the issue of they may not have even thought about it. Like so many times, disability is not included in that diversity conversation. You're talking about race, sexual orientation, gender, and I think the biggest step was making sure that when talking about diversity and inclusion, disability is included in there. And I see that more and more where people are including disability in that diversity conversation. And so when that happens, then there's the opportunity for casting directors, for writers to be thinking about that more often as they're working on their TV shows and films.
Neat. I want to remind our listeners and viewers that our guest today is Lowen, who's the communications director at RespectAbility. So you mentioned that one of the shows that you guys at RespectAbility are involved with is the Emmy-winning show Born This Way, and we've had a number of the cast on this program here, and can you share with us how RespectAbility first got involved in the show Born This Way, and a little bit about that backstory?
Right. So Jonathan Murray, who created the show, he is on our board of directors. And he actually met my boss, the president of RespectAbility, Jennifer Laszlo-Mizrahi, at a Democratic National Convention. And they had been talking about different representation. Now, Jonathan had learned very early on in his career how by including characters or cast members who are LGBT, for example, went a long way to change popular public opinion on inclusion. And so he, as a content creator, has always kind of been thinking outside the box on how to include people who might be considered, other. And he had been working on this show for a while. It had a few different iterations, and then when it came to fruition, had let us know. And as I mentioned before, when the show before the show premiered, we had a Hollywood style premiere here on Capitol Hill in Washington D.C. Jonathan came out, executives from A&E Network, where it airs. It's currently in its fourth season on A&E, or they're currently shooting their fourth season for A&E, And John Tucker, who is a rapper on the show, and one of the stars, the young adults with Down syndrome, and his mother came, and we showed the first episode. We had a panel discussion. Members of Congress came and spoke, and I really enjoyed helping with the social media outreach. During the first season, which was 6 episodes, viewership grew every week to reach 1 million viewers, which then led to the show being renewed for a second season. And then, as you mentioned, it won Emmy for Best Unstructured Reality TV Show, led to a third season, and now they're currently shooting their 4th season. And last night, they just won the Critics' Choice Award for Best Unstructured Reality TV Show as well. Awesome. I think when I think reality TV, I think something very different than when I think of what Born This Way is, because Born This Way is not as manufactured as it often appears in some other reality TV shows. But what I do see in ways is that they're tackling important issues that are not shown on TV. For example, when Sean went for a medical procedure and then almost decided he didn't want to do it, there was an opportunity for on the show to talk about medical consent and who is in charge as a young adult who is no longer a minor, who's in charge of your body. Sean's parents were very clear about how Sean has the autonomy over that. But that's an important conversation that a lot of families have. Another episode dealt with sex education. The rate of rape and sexual assault in the disability community is so high. And oftentimes there is not enough education for children and young adults with disabilities. They're not brought into the normal curriculum for sex education that a lot of schools have. And so one of the episodes of Born This Way highlighted that and brought in a sex education counselor. Another week, there was talking about financial literacy and financial planning and ABLE accounts. And so when these things occurred, and then one of the episodes focused a lot on employment on an event that we at RespectAbility held in partnership with Representative Brad Sherman in Sherman Oaks, California. And the show was able to film a bunch of the cast members there being self-advocates about themselves for employment. And what we at RespectAbility did is for each of those episodes, we created a toolkit. And so it's now something, the sex education resources on our website is one of the most highly trafficked pages on our site, because those resources, as compiled, don't exist everywhere. And so we really saw an opportunity to, work with each episode to ensure that we were putting out toolkits and more resources and information for families, for young adults with disabilities and others who work in the area to be able to utilize that.
Awesome. How can our listeners find that toolkit that you had mentioned that goes along with?
Sure. So if you go to our website, which is www.respectability.org, and then you can click on resources, or you can just go www.respectability.org/resources, and you'll find our Solution Center. And some of the resources that are included are education resources, employers, ending the school to prison pipeline for criminal justice reform, resources for entertainment professionals, faith inclusion, inclusive philanthropy, resources for job seekers with disabilities, for policymakers, and the sex education resources I mentioned. And this is always a living document. There are always new resources that occur. So I invite anyone who wants to submit additional resources to please do so. And we're constantly updating it, because we want this to be a tool for adults with disabilities, for their families, for people who work within the disability community to be able to come to and find information that they need.
Awesome. So you mentioned that the creator of Born This Way, Jonathan Moy, is on your board of directors. How did you guys begin to work with Jonathan?
Sure. So as I mentioned, our president, Jennifer Lazar-Mizrahi, had met Jonathan Murray at a Democratic National Convention. So they had sparked a conversation, and because of his important work in this area, we wanted to, we obviously kept up this conversation, and he has provided invaluable insights for us in how we can be most effective with working with the Hollywood community to ensure that we're coming in and providing resources and information that can be useful to people. To me, as someone who, like him, went to journalism school for my graduate degree, and originally had an interest in doing documentary filmmaking. The amount that I get to learn from him every time I see him or talk to him is just like a wonderful perk of this job.
Awesome. So doing season 3 of Bonus 8 that I believe aired in May of 2017 through July, I believe, in that time frame, you guys at RespectAbility had hosted Twitter chats during the airing of that show. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why you decided to host these live Twitter chats and the response from that?
So we recognized, and we did this for seasons 2 and 3, we recognized a trend that people enjoy live tweeting their favorite shows. Mm-hmm. And so we figured we could use these Twitter chats as an opportunity to increase viewership of Born This Way and conversation, and B, be able to increase education about the issues that were being discussed during that week's episode. And then we also found out that one of the metrics that's used to measure a show's success is not only viewership, but also Twitter hashtag mentions. So we figured, why not help out with that? We can organize these Twitter chats. We had various cast members of the show join us, including Megan would join us for some of the shows, and then Sean and his mom joined us for some of them, live tweeting along with the viewers, which I think makes a nice interactive experience for both individuals with Down syndrome, parents with Down syndrome, and individuals and parents with other disabilities. And so being able to kind of look at some of the issues that are occurring as these young adults are doing everything that everyone else in their 20s and 30s are doing in terms of getting a job, moving out, falling in love. And so being able to provide a platform for cast members from the show for them to be able to interact with viewers was something that we thought that we could do to continue assisting the show.
Awesome. And I saw that you had a fan guide for Born This Way with free resources. Is that connected with that toolkit that you had mentioned, or can you tell us a little bit about this fan guide?
So we kind of launched these resources, many of these resources, in the Born This Way fan guide. As kind of when Born This Way first came out, we provided resources for their educational guide, including some books to read and other sources. That could be used by educators and others as a teaching guide. So we saw this last season an opportunity to launch a much wide-reaching resource guide. So we started with that, and then as future episodes had other things like the sex education, we added additional pages. And so that's why I always recommend, we had the PDF that was current as of that date. The website is the most current place because that's where we're constantly updating as people provide additional suggestions. We work to include those.
So on the show Born This Way, do you guys know what topics they're going to be discussing before it airs, so you can put it in the guide on your website or this document, or can you tell us a bit about how that works?
Yes, yes, we do work closely with the production team, so we are aware of what topics will be discussed at different weeks. We throughout the series, we've been able to provide input as necessary, or if we aren't the best people to provide input, to connect them to other organizations. Like how they've been connected to Best Buddies, to ensure that they are working and getting the information that they need. As I mentioned, some people are afraid to cover disability because they don't know what they don't know, and they're afraid to make a mistake. So, we've definitely received calls from them saying, we're thinking about talking about topic X. What are your thoughts? Are there other people we should talk to about this? They're currently filming season 4 right now. It's going to be a great season, but as Sean says, no spoilers. So, can't give anything like that. All I can say is it's definitely going to be a really great season, and I feel like every season it just gets better and better because we're more invested in all the cast members succeeding. Awesome.
So I want to remind our listeners again that our guest today is Lowen, who is the communications director at RespectAbility. And I saw that one of the campaigns that you guys have is the Respect the Ability campaign. Can you tell us a little bit about that campaign? And
sure. So the hashtag Respect the Ability campaign has been around since we've been around. And it highlights model employers that demonstrate how hiring workers with disabilities benefits not only the employer, but also the employee and society as a whole. The campaign's goal is to erase negative and untrue stigmas associated with hiring people with disabilities. So I mentioned our amazing fellowship program earlier, and a lot of the work that is done on the Respect the Ability campaign is done by our fellows. And we do that by doing profiles of companies that are hiring people with disabilities in a real meaningful way at all levels, as well as profiles of celebrities and other professionals who are public about having a disability but are still extremely successful in their life. We see this as being able to provide role models for young adults, students, and children with disabilities, as well as to try and fight this idea, this stigma that if you have a disability, you're incapable of succeeding in it.
Neat. So, are there any other TV shows beyond just Born This Way that you guys at RespectAbility are working closely with, like with these toolkits and guides and Twitter chats that you guys are working with Born This Way? But are there any other shows that you guys are working with, like either the show Speechless on ABC or The Good Doctor, or any other shows that you guys?
We are working with a lot of showrunners and a lot of studios, but a lot of the work that we're doing for other shows is very much behind the scenes and not something that we can publicly be talking about.
Yeah.
I enjoy working, being able to serve as a resource for different shows and films. I think it's a really great use of our time and skill set, because it's not just affecting, the person who's creating it, but it's affecting the millions of people who are then watching it.
Yeah.
And especially on a TV show with recurring characters where you see, it week after week. I think truly has an opportunity to improve people's perceptions of people with disabilities, whether they be medical professionals who are reluctant to treat people with disabilities, or employers who are reluctant to hire employees with disabilities, or teachers who don't know how to teach students with disabilities. Being more we see disability represented for TV and film, the less there are going to be people worry, thinking these negative and untrue stigmas.
Neat. And what do you see as the impact from when you talk with the showrunners and the studios that you guys work with? What's been the response from them from getting the various resources to help them with encouraging more inclusion for people with disabilities and on the shows that they'll produce, and what's been their response from?
Overwhelmingly positive. It is really great to. I mean, rarely do I meet with someone who says like no. Oftentimes it's, oh, that's interesting. I want to learn more. Change does not happen overnight, and it's not, unfortunately, going to happen overnight. But I am quite optimistic that over the next few years, we are going to see a wave of change, of representation of diverse individuals with differing with diverse disabilities.
And I want to remind our listeners again that our guest today is Lauren, who's the communications director at RespectAbility. Can you share with us some of how our listeners can find out more about RespectAbility and follow you guys on social media? And you had mentioned earlier Toolkit and the fan guide and some resources. Any a website or resources that our listeners can find out more information?
So our website, where all of our resources can be found, is www.RespectAbility. So it's the two words, respect and ability, .org. And if you just do /resources, you'll get to all of our different resource guides, as well as all of our free webinars that we have hosted over the past 4 years, including links to watch the videos or read the transcripts. You can follow us on social media. On Twitter, we're at respect_ability. And on Facebook, we're at RespectAbility USA. We're always looking for fun content to share and to promote. So if you're working in this area and doing something that you think would be of interest to other people, please don't hesitate to send our way. We also send out a weekly Hollywood e-newsletter, where we do have our own content, but as well as curate content from others, and as well as a monthly employment newsletter. So anyone who has something they'd like to share, we for sure welcome it. And if you want to be added to those e-newsletters, you can do so on our website. You can also just reach out to me via email. My email is laurena, LAURENA, @respectability.org.
Awesome. And I'll make sure to include all those links on specialchronicles.com for our listeners. Do you know how you guys came up with the name RespectAbility? Is there any backstory to?
So that was before my time. And it was created by actually no one who works here, but as people were bouncing ideas off a name, someone came up with it. Kind of behind the idea of #RespectAbility, but just respectability.
Awesome. Do you have any final thoughts that on your overall time here today that you want to share with our listeners?
No, I feel your questions were quite comprehensive. So I thank you for those. I thank you for the time to be able to share the information that we're working on. If anyone wants to be involved, we are hiring fellows for all 3 cohorts. We have them in the summer, the fall, and the spring. They're for current college students, graduate students, and recent graduates, as well as if someone is re-entering the workforce for a variety of reasons. And you can find more information about that on our website. We are looking for fellows in communications and policy, development, fundraising, as well as faith inclusion. We're also looking for volunteers. And that the fellowship itself is in Rockville, Maryland, outside Washington, D.C. But volunteers can be done from anywhere, from home, if you're interested. So don't hesitate to reach out if you'd like to volunteer as well.
Awesome. And if our listeners want to share the feedback, you can email us feedback@specialchronicles.com and with an email or audio file. You can join the conversation on social media at Special Chronicles on Facebook and Instagram, and at Special C Podcast on Twitter. And you can leave us your 5-star ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts, on Stitcher, Google Play, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thank you. Our guest today has been Lowen Appelbaum, the Communications Director at RespectAbility. Thank you again for coming on Special Chronicles, and hope we can meet up in Portland someday.
Yep, I would love that. Next time we're in the same city, we should really get together.
Yeah, definitely.
So thank you so much for having me on the show, and I hope your listeners enjoyed it as well.
Awesome. And until the next time, take care and God bless.
Special Chronicles, giving respect and a voice to people with special needs.
Well, I hope that you all enjoyed that we broadcasted episode conversation with Lowen Appelbaum from RespectAbility. A few reminders at the before we conclude this episode. Just like to let you know, you can shop our merchandise store. Know that 60% of the profits will go back to Special Chronicles. You can shop our Disabled Voices Matter line of merch. We have t-shirts, hoodies, coffee mugs. SpecialChronicles.com/shop is where you can go. And you keep following the Special Chronicles podcast so you never miss a new episode every Monday right here on SpecialChronicles.com. Remember, SpecialChronicles.com/give to support this, to help us operate our studio and support this podcast, and SpecialChronicles.com/plus to access all bonus content. And coming up in the next couple of weeks, we will be talking about creating Team Coca-Cola and refreshing Team Coca-Cola. That you heard at the beginning of this month, but we will have a couple all new episodes, all related to Team Coca-Cola and the Paris 2024 Olympics. And until then, we'll be back next week, same time, same place on SpecialChronicles.com and wherever you get your podcasts. And until then, remember, choose to include, and I'll catch you all next week right here on SpecialChronicles.com. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Special Chronicles Podcast. Our podcast was produced by Daniel Smrokowski on the Special Chronicles Network. Follow Special Chronicles on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Subscribe, rate, and review Special Chronicles on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Our website, SpecialChronicles.com, where you can stream our archives of over 500 episodes for absolutely for free. Also, there's a list of our favorites, original series, award-winning columns, and blogs. And sign up for our newsletter to receive exclusive bonus content delivered to your inbox. Again, SpecialChronicles.com. Special Chronicles is hosted by Podbean Podcast Hosting. Our live streams are powered by StreamYard. Thanks, as always, to our business manager, Adam Smrokowski, who always encourages us to never give up. I'm Daniel Smrokowski, back next week with more stories.
Special Chronicles, giving respect and a voice to people with special needs.